Took my sewing machine with me. It wasn't heavy. Not really, but I carried it with both arms pressed against my chest, the whole 4 blocks home, and I didn't stop once. It was a Tuesday. I remember because my program comes on at 3 on Tuesdays, the one about the antique appraisers, and I had been looking forward to it all week. That's the kind of thing you notice when you're 71 and living in your daughter-in-law's house. You hold on to the small things, the Tuesday program, the good mug in the back of the cabinet that nobody else uses, the 15 minutes of quiet before anyone else wakes up. I should back up. My name is Dorothy. I am 71 years old, and for the last 2 years I have lived. Lived is generous. Let's say I have existed in the spare bedroom of my son's house in Glendale, Arizona. My husband passed in the spring of 2021. Pancreatic cancer. 63 days from diagnosis to the end. I held his hand through most of it. When it was over, I sold the house in Tucson because I couldn't maintain it alone, and because my son called and said, "Mom, come stay with us. We have the room. We want you here. We want you here. We want you here." I replayed that sentence for 3 days before I said yes. I wanted to believe it. His name is Christopher. He's 44, works in logistics, coaches his son's little league team on Saturdays. He's not a bad man. I want to be clear about that, because this story could easily make him sound like one, and that's not entirely fair. Christopher loves me the way some people love old furniture, fondly, from a distance, and mostly just hoping it doesn't become a problem. His wife, Melissa, is a different story. Melissa is 41, and she runs the house the way a general runs a campaign, with efficiency, clear hierarchy, and very little room for anyone who doesn't fit the strategy. She works part-time at a dental office and full-time at being in charge. When I first moved in, she was pleasant, helped me set up my room, showed me where things were in the kitchen, smiled at dinner. The smiling stopped around month 3. It was small things at first. The way she'd rearrange what I'd put in the dishwasher without saying anything, just silently moving my mugs and plates like my way was wrong. The way she'd answer questions I directed at Christopher before he had a chance to open his mouth. The way she started referring to the guest bathroom, the one I used, as the kids' bathroom. So I began timing my showers to when the children were at school, just to avoid the implication. Their children are Henry, who's 13, and Aubrey, who is 9. Henry is quiet and careful, the kind of boy who reads the room before he speaks. Aubrey is loud and golden and adored by everyone, and she used to climb into my bed on Sunday mornings and ask me to tell her about when I was little. I loved those mornings. I loved her. I taught elementary school for 31 years, 3rd grade mostly. I know how to be patient. I know how to pick my battles. I know how to stay quiet in a room where the power doesn't belong to me. I did all of that. For 2 years, I did all of that, but there's a difference between being patient and being erased. The sewing machine had been my mother's. A singer from 1974, still running perfectly, because my mother believed that anything worth having was worth maintaining. When I moved into the spare room, I set it up on the small table near the window. I made curtains for Aubrey's room, yellow ones with little white daisies, because she asked me to. I repaired the hem on Henry's baseball pants twice. I made a quilt for the pull-out couch. I kept myself useful because that's what you do when you're living in someone else's space. You justify your presence. Last September, Melissa redecorated the spare room. I came home from my Thursday morning walk to find 2 men loading my sewing machine into the hallway. The small table was gone. The reading chair I'd brought from Tucson. The green one that had been in our living room for 20 years, where I used to sit and grade papers while my husband watched the news, was against the wall with a sticky note on it that said garage. Melissa was standing in the doorway with a paint chip in her hand. The room was going to be a home office. She needed the space. She'd already ordered the desk. "Where will I sleep?" I asked. She said she'd looked into it, and there was a daybed on sale at Target that would fit along the wall. I could still have the room. It would just be a shared space. A shared space. I looked at the paint chip she was holding. It was gray. The kind of gray that doesn't commit to anything. I said, okay. Because what else do you say when you're 71 and your name isn't on the mortgage, and your son is standing behind his wife, nodding slowly like a man who made his choice years ago and is only now letting you see it? I said okay, and I went for another walk, and I sat on the bench outside the CVS on Camelback for 40 minutes and watched the cars go by. The daybed arrived on a Thursday. The desk arrived on a Friday. By the weekend, my room, the room I had arranged and lived in for 2 years, was mostly Melissa's office, with a narrow daybed pushed against one wall like an afterthought. She put a decorative pillow on it, beige, as if that made it something other than what it was. I moved my things to the edges. I reorganized my small space around her large one. I stopped using the room during the day because she worked from home 3 days a week, and the clicking of her keyboard and her phone calls filled the space entirely. I started spending my days in the kitchen or on the back porch, reading, watching the neighbor's dog in the yard next door, waiting for 3 o'clock on Tuesdays. My friend Joanne called me every Sunday. We taught together for 15 years before she retired to Flagstaff. She kept saying, "Dorothy, you can come stay with me. I have the whole second floor." I kept saying I was fine. I wasn't fine. The dinner was Melissa's idea. She was hosting a birthday party for one of her friends from the dental office, a woman named Cheryl who I had met twice and who always looked at me like she was trying to remember where she'd seen me before. 8 people were coming. Melissa had been planning it for 3 weeks. She'd ordered appetizers from a catering place and made a lamb dish herself and bought 2 bottles of wine that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I offered to help. I said I could make my peach cobbler, the one Christopher has been asking me to make since he was 12 years old. She said it was fine. She had it covered. The afternoon of the party, I was in the kitchen making a cup of tea when Melissa came in to start setting up. She needed the counter space. Could I maybe finish up? She said it pleasantly, the way you say things when you need them to sound like suggestions. I took my tea to the back porch. Around 5:30, the guests started arriving. I could hear them through the screen door. Laughter, the sound of heels on the tile, the pop of a wine bottle. I thought about going in to say hello. I'd gotten dressed, put on my good blue blouse. I'd been looking forward to a little conversation, honestly. Living the way I'd been living, adult conversation felt like something I had to ration. I opened the screen door. Melissa was at the counter arranging a charcuterie board. She looked up when I came in, and something crossed her face. Not exactly annoyance, more like recalculation. "Oh," she said. "Dorothy." She paused. "We're going to be eating in shifts, just the way it's working out with the seating. Why don't you plan to eat after the guests? There should be plenty left over." I stood there. Eat after the guests. In the kitchen I had stood in every morning for 2 years. At the table I had sat at every night for 2 years. After the guests. As if I were the help. As if I were invisible. As if 67 years of life and 31 years of teaching other people's children and 2 years of repairing hems and making curtains and staying quiet could be summarized neatly as, "You'll eat when we're done." I didn't say anything. I looked at Christopher, who was across the room refilling a water pitcher, and he didn't look up. I went back to the spare room. I sat on the narrow daybed with the beige decorative pillow, and I thought about my mother's sewing machine sitting in the hallway with the door to the office closed around everything else that used to be mine. And then I stopped thinking about it. I stood up. I changed out of my good blue blouse and put on comfortable clothes. I took the sewing machine. It lives in a case, rolls on 2 small wheels, and I brought it to the front door. I went back and got the green reading chair, which was still in the garage with the sticky note on it. I couldn't carry that, so I left a voicemail for my friend Joanne. Then I wrote a note. I put it on the kitchen counter where Melissa would find it later, after the guests, after the leftover lamb, after the second bottle of wine. It said, "I've gone home. Thank you for the last 2 years. Dorothy." I had a home. That's the part I should explain because it matters. After my husband passed and I sold the Tucson house, I didn't spend all of it. I kept enough, more than enough, because we had been careful people, my husband and I, the kind of people who packed lunches and drove cars until they stopped running and never once believed that money was for spending before you needed to. I had an amount put away that I never mentioned to Christopher, not because I was hiding it, but because it was mine, and I have always believed that a woman should have something that is entirely her own. I had been living in Christopher's house out of a desire to be close to family, not because I had no other choice. That distinction had gotten blurry over 2 years. I had let it get blurry. I'd started to confuse gratitude for dependence, proximity for belonging. Joanne called back 20 minutes after I left the voicemail. Front door or back door, she said. Front, I said. I have the sewing machine. She drove 3 hours from Flagstaff that night. She didn't ask questions on the phone. She showed up at the extended stay motel on Indian School Road where I'd checked in after a cab dropped me there, and she sat on the bed next to me, and she said, "Okay, what do we do next?" That was 6 months ago. What we did next was find me an apartment. A real one, not a room, not a daybed, not a shared space in someone else's life. It's a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building in Scottsdale, 10 minutes from a good library and 4 blocks from a park where older women walk in the mornings and sometimes stop and talk to each other. The 2nd bedroom is for the sewing machine and the green chair and the drafting table I bought at an estate sale and the stacks of fabric I've been collecting since the 1980s. The first week, I made curtains for every window. I made them exactly the way I wanted. Deep blue with a thin stripe of cream near the hem. I hung them myself, standing on the step stool my husband gave me the year we moved into the Tucson house. And when I stepped back and looked at them, I sat down on the floor and cried for a little while. Not because I was sad, because they were mine. I started taking a quilting class at the community center on Wednesday mornings. 6 women, a table full of fabric, a teacher named Helen who is 83 and has opinions about batting that she is not afraid to share. 2 of the women have become real friends, the kind you call when something funny happens, not just the kind you wave at. Christopher called about 2 weeks after I left. I let it go to voicemail. He said he was worried, that he didn't know I was unhappy, that he wished I'd said something. He said Melissa felt terrible. He didn't mention the home office. He didn't mention the daybed. He didn't mention standing across the kitchen while his wife told his mother to eat after the guests. I called him back 3 days later. I told him I was well. I told him I had an apartment and I was starting a quilting class. I told him I loved him and that I was not angry. I meant all of it. I wasn't angry. I had moved past the part where anger lives. He asked if he could visit. I said of course. He came on a Saturday alone, and I made coffee, and we sat at my small kitchen table and talked for 2 hours like we hadn't in years. About his father, about his childhood, about a road trip we took when he was 9, and the car broke down in New Mexico, and we ate sandwiches on the hood and watched the sun go down over the desert. He cried a little. I handed him a napkin. Before he left, he stood in the doorway of the 2nd bedroom and looked at the sewing machine on its table by the window and said, "Is that Grandma Singer?" "It is," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "I forgot you had that," he said. I had not forgotten. Aubrey asks about me, according to Christopher. She wants to know why Grandma Dorothy doesn't live with them anymore. Christopher said he told her that I got my own place because I like having my own space, which is true, even if it's not the whole truth. She apparently accepted this with the pragmatism of 9-year-olds. She asked if she could still come over sometimes. I told Christopher to tell her yes. Anytime. I'll teach her to sew. Henry is harder. He's 13, and 13 is old enough to understand that something happened even when no one will say what it was. He sent me a text last month, just a photo of a bird he'd seen at school, a curved-billed thrasher, the Arizona state bird, something I told him about once. No message, just the photo. I texted back a photo of the curtains. He sent back a thumbs up. Then, after a minute, a heart. 13-year-old boys are not complicated. They just need to know the door is open. I've been thinking lately about what I should have known sooner and what I'm still learning. And here's what I've come to. The moment you stop taking up the space you're entitled to, someone else will fill it, not necessarily out of malice. Sometimes just out of convenience. The office needed a room. The room was mine. The equation was that simple in Melissa's mind, and maybe she was never entirely wrong to think of it that way, because I had never once said this room is mine, clearly, with the kind of voice that expects to be heard. I say it now. This apartment is mine. This kitchen table is mine. This window, this view of the parking lot and the oleander hedge and the slice of mountain in the distance. Mine. The Tuesday program watched from the green chair at exactly 3 o'clock, undisturbed. Mine. The sewing machine hums when it runs. It's a sound I grew up with, my mother's foot on the pedal in the back bedroom, the whir of the needle through cotton or linen or the good wool she saved for special things. I hear it now when I sit down at the table, and sometimes I think about how many things that machine has made. My mother's curtains, my own children's Halloween costumes, Aubrey's yellow curtains, the quilt on the pull-out couch in a house where I ate my meals at other people's convenience. And now, on a Tuesday afternoon in my own apartment, deep blue curtains in every window, a cup of tea on the table, and the program about the antique appraisers about to start. Mine. I carried it 4 blocks and I never once put it down. I've thought a lot about what took me so long. 2 years is a long time to shrink. And that's what I did. I shrunk slowly, the way fabric does when you wash it too hot. A little less each time, a little more careful, a little quieter in rooms where I used to feel at home. I don't blame Christopher entirely. I raised him and I know where his softness comes from. It's the same softness that made him cry at the kitchen table when we talked about his father. The same softness that made him a good boy and, in some ways, a man who finds it easier to keep the peace than to defend what's right. That's not cruelty. That's a choice people make every day and they live with the results of it. And Melissa, I've tried to be fair to her too. She didn't set out to diminish me. She set out to run her house the way she saw fit, and I happened to be in the way. The office needed a room. The room was occupied. The math was simple to her. What she never counted was the cost of the math to me. The green chair with the sticky note, the daybed against the wall, the evening she told me to wait and eat after the guests like I was a problem to be managed, rather than a person to be included. That sentence is where the accounting finally came due. Not in a dramatic way. Not with raised voices or slammed doors. Just a quiet internal settlement. The kind where you look at the number and you say, this is what it costs to stay, and I'm not willing to pay it anymore. There's something I want to say about the sewing machine, because I think it matters. I didn't take it to make a point. I took it because it was mine. Because my mother ran it in the back bedroom of our house in Ohio for 40 years and it still worked perfectly. And if I had left it there, it would have ended up in a garage sale or a donation bin and nobody would have known what it was worth. Not the money, the other kind of worth. The kind that doesn't show up on any receipt. I think that's what I had been leaving behind, little by little, for 2 years. Not just space in a room. The other kind of worth. And the moment I picked up that case and walked out the front door, I was taking it back. What I know now, at 71, is this. The way you treat yourself teaches everyone around you how to treat you. I had been so careful, so accommodating, so determined not to be a burden, that I had made it very easy for the people around me to agree. I tiptoed and reorganized and timed my showers and sat on a bench outside a CVS for 40 minutes because I didn't want to be inconvenient. And so I wasn't. I was invisible. There's not much difference. The life I have now didn't require anything dramatic. It required one decision, made quietly, on a narrow daybed with a beige pillow in a room that used to be mine. It required me to remember that I had options I had chosen not to use, and to finally use them. The apartment was waiting. Joanne was waiting. The quilting class on Wednesday mornings was waiting. None of it appeared the moment I left. It was already there. I had just been standing in someone else's hallway instead of walking toward it. Henry sent me a photo of a bird last month. No words. Just a bird, and then a heart. That's enough. That's more than enough. The curtains in my apartment are exactly the color I wanted. Nobody moved them. Nobody put a sticky note on them. They're just there, in every window, deep blue with a stripe of cream, made by my hands on my mother's machine, in my own home. I earned this. Not by suffering, but by finally deciding that I had.